this morning for this Sunday service at Ananda, Rhode Island. And I'd like to begin by reading from Whispers from Eternity. It's the demand for the removal of the veil of illusion. Veils surround me, Father, hiding thee from me. I love the dainty colored veils of roses and daisies, the shining veils of clouds of burning gold, the dark star-decked shawl of the night. But how long wilt thou remain hidden behind all these veils? I love them because they hint at thy presence, yet still they hide thee. I long to see thee as thou art, behind all this cover of veils. Om. And this morning's topic of did God create or God become the universe? I mean, what a vast topic! I mean, God, my goodness. And I want to just take a little part of that reading and time allowed to elucidate a little bit about that. And it's that light, I think all of us have heard it many times. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Now that's a very mystical stain, has many esoteric meanings to it, but it also has a very practical meaning and application that Swami Kriyananda would explain to us. And so I want to explore it on that level. And you could say that I'll start with a little story. I think all of you have probably heard about there was once a little frog. He lived in a pond, in a lake. He lived in a really big lake, vast lake, and he decided to go exploring one day into the forest and to see what was in the world around him. And he hopped, and in a little while he came to a little puddle. There's not much more than that. It wasn't even, you wouldn't even call it a pond. It was just a puddle. And there were some other frogs there, and he found his brother frogs were there, and he started talking to them, and he realized that these little brother frogs, they had no idea. They had asked where he came from, and he said, "Oh, I come from the big lake, not too far from here. It's much bigger than here. You should all come with me. It's a much nicer home than you have here." And they said, "No, come on. This is our home, and this is where we is, and anything much bigger than this." And finally, out came the big bullfrog, who was, you might say, in charge of the pond or the little puddle. And he says, "What are you speaking about? These fantasies and trying to draw all these people away. Must be for some bad purpose." And he says, No, I come from a much bigger and better place than you. This is much nicer there. You'll all enjoy it." And he says, "It's bigger? Well, how big? It's bigger than this?" And he's, "Oh, much bigger." And then the frog, he leaped across the pond, and is it that big? "Oh, much bigger." And then the bullfrog leaped back, and he went even further. "And is it that big?" "Oh, much, much further." The little frog said, "Ha, he's fooling you. Don't follow him." And of course, now the story goes on in a number of different ways. But the idea here is that whether the frogs followed him or didn't follow him, but you could see that the great ones come into this world, and they tell us of a puddle, of this little puddle that we're in. There's something much more great than this, if we would only but explore that. And of course, people maybe believe them, but we have no comprehension of what they're talking about. And oftentimes we resist it even because we're comfortable in the life that we're living in. And I remember, and I think it's an example of the light shineth in darkness, but the darkness cannot comprehend the light. There's an old saying, I believe it's an Arab proverb, and it goes like this. I have to read this because I get it all mixed up. He said, the proverb goes, "Men are for he who knows not, and knows not that he knows not, he is a fool. Shun him. He who knows not, and knows he knows not, he is simple. teach him. He who knows and knows not he knows, he is asleep. Wake him. He who knows and knows that he knows, he is wise. Follow him. Now you could see how I could get that all tangled if I didn't read it. But basically what they're saying is the wise person can understand the unwise. The mature person can understand the immature. And I mean, this is the principle of education for life, where Swami Kriyananda defined maturity as the ability to relate to the realities of other people. And a child, they grow in maturity because a little child, they can't relate to the realities of the adult. But the adult, having once been a child, the adult can relate to the child. So you could say the mature person can relate to the immature, but the other does not, because you could say the darkness cannot perceive the light, but the light can perceive, understand the darkness and the relativity of it. If you know something, you can explain it to the person who doesn't know, to the ignorant person, but not vice versa. It doesn't work the other way. And this is applicable in many ways in our life. And it was something that what Swami would say, he says, when you're dealing with other people, and he was a man who dealt with many, many people, thousands of people, he says, there are those people that you can reach easily. It's like in the Bhagavad Gita, it speaks about there are people of different qualities. Those people who are sattvic, in other words, those people are elevated. They have a little bit of ignorance and just a little puff. You can blow away the dust. It's like dust on a mirror. You just blow it away and it goes away quite easily with just a little bit of instruction. And then it says there are another sort of people that are a little bit more embedded in their ignorance or their attachment to this world. And he said they're the Rajasic sorts, energetic folks. He says but you can reach them too. You have to rub the mirror a little bit more. You just can't blow it away. You have to polish it a little bit, and then they too can see the reflection in the mirror. And he says, then of course, in the Gita says there are those people who are embedded in ignorance, and you just can't rub it away. He said they're like the baby in the womb. It's only, there's nothing you can do about it except wait. When the time comes, the baby will give birth. And many people are like that. And he would say, when we're dealing with other people, we're going to have all sorts. People you can reach easily, and some people you're just not going to be able to reach them. And so he said, don't, spend all of your energy trying to reach those people, because it's only going to take time. The best thing for people who are embedded in, you might say, darkness in this case, is put them in an environment that is going to, in time, the environment will rub off on them, and eventually they too will rise up. And so he was using this example also in teaching children. Some people are very quick, and but then those people that aren't, you might say, that are more dull, he says, put them in the company of children who are quick, and that will rub off on them. And then eventually they'll be able to. And this is very practically speaking, because in other words, even he was saying, he says, when we were teaching and we were going out to serve, he says, look for those people that are awake, that that are ready, and those are the people that, if you can get those people to wake up, those are the people that will carry any work forward. And that will be because they, once being awake, they're going to reach out and they're going to reach other people. And so a work, and it doesn't, a spiritual work is that way, but yet any enterprise, any successful enterprise, look for those people and give the majority of your energy to those people, because the people that are asleep, you'll spend all your time getting them to wake up, and then they'll go back to sleep again. And he says, and it wasn't a negative judgment so much. It was just a statement of how the reality works. And for those people, we have compassion. We have to help them in a way that will reach them. And I know when I first met Swami Kriyananda, I was a little bit asleep, you might say. And I didn't understand what he was talking about, really. I mean, I thought I did, you see, because we think we know, but we don't know. And we're in our cocoon of assumption that we know everything. And a young person, I was a young person those days, I thought I knew pretty much everything that needed to be known. I could, not necessarily facts, but yet, and I basically judged Swami Kriyananda according to my understanding, and so I was not able to see that the vastness of what he was trying to share with me and with other people. And I imagine, think of the same thing, those people that came into the presence of Paramhansa Yogananda. His vision was vast, infinite, yet he had to deal on the day-to-day level with people who saw just a certain size pond. And it raises the question, because all of us, I mean, the society as a whole, science, technology, we approach this world as how does anything new understanding come into this world? Because we can only understand according to the faculties and the knowledge that we already have. But there's way beyond what we understand of this world, of the potential. But yet, if we're limited to our 52 cards of knowledge, like a deck of cards, it's just a matter, much of scientific inquiry is simply rearranging those cards in new combinations. Now it comes, you can get many interesting things, but how does new information, how does things that are beyond our ability to understand now, how do we understand them? Or how do we bring that into our consciousness? And I think this is the element of how do we, you could say it in spiritual terms, how do we draw not just from the intellect, but how do we draw something vaster? And it comes from what we call the superconsciousness. And how do we draw that infinite potential of everything there is into the world that we know from our little faculties? And it reminded me of a book that I read many years ago. Swami Kriyananda had quoted from this book, and so I got the book and I read it. And it was about the life of great composers mostly of the 19th, early 20th century. And this fellow he noticed that the great composers, and I remember there was Brahms was one of them, and there were others as well. But I remember his interview at that time with this composer Brahms, and he asking him, where did your melodies come from? Where did your great symphonies, where do they come from? And Brahms said, I hear them. I go, and he says, I go and I feel, and I'm in an uplifted state, and I hear the music coming in, and my job is then I record it. In other words, and this is something that many of the great composers had said, it came from a higher source. Now, we would say it came from the superconscious, they were able to open themselves up to the superconscious to draw that down. And you could also say it in this way. You could say they drew from the world of grace. It was from a higher plane, the superconscious plane. And you could say even somebody like Einstein, who perceived his theory of relativity, he perceived it intuitively. He didn't work it up just from the mathematics, more complicated, more complicated, more complicated, and then he understood relativity. He saw it in his intuition. And he said it took him many years of understanding the mathematics of how to explain it with the mathematics. And it took him a long time. We intuit it from the superconsciousness, and we draw that down. And this is how new knowledge, you could say, comes in, is we draw it intuitively from the superconscious plane down into our lives. And I think this really is very similar. It's really similar to drawing grace into our lives if we speak about devotees. We know what we can do, and we try and try. We do the various techniques. We do Kriya, we meditate, we exert our will, but something more is needed. The self-effort, you could say, is working with that which we know. But how do we go beyond the barrier of what we know to draw in what we don't know, which is foreign to us, is new? It's like trying to pick ourselves up. If we're sitting in a chair right now, can I grab the bottom of the chair and lift myself up off the ground? No, we can't. We can't do it through our own self-effort. There has to be something more to draw down. And that's what we refer to as grace, lifting of grace. And our job, the whole path of the spiritual life, is to attune ourselves, to prepare ourselves, to remove the obstacles to that which prevents grace from coming into our lives. But we cannot create it. Grace is that power that comes when something more is needed. And really, this is the aspect of the development of the heart. It's the heart's love that draws grace to it. And you could say that if we were to use the analogy of Christianity, or the tradition that began in Judaic times, Moses brought the law, the rule. You could say he guided Jewish people out of bondage and gave them the law, the 10 Commandments, the Torah. But often it said, Moses gave the law, but Jesus Christ brought the fulfillment of the law, because the law itself is not enough. There must be the Spirit as well as the law. The law in and of itself doesn't make a person holy. Following all the rules intellectually does not make a person understand the subtleties of the spiritual path. Law, rules, rituals, these sorts of outer things will not get us into the kingdom of heaven. Something more is needed. And ultimately, this is the intuitive ability, that you could say that the ability to open ourselves to the flow of the superconsciousness into our lives, the ability to draw grace, that underlying flow of divine power. This is what finally draws us up into the light. And we begin, of course, by following the rules. And we have to follow the rules in order to align ourselves, to attune ourselves, to put ourselves in the position of being able to draw that grace to us, to be able to submit to us. And this is what we say in the Festival of Light. He says we must choose that. We use our ability to choose to attune ourselves to grace. I choose thy love. I choose only thee. And it's summed up in the Bhagavad Gita, in the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to read here this passage from the Gita. And Krishna says, take my last word, my utmost meaning have, precious art thou to me, right well beloved. Listen, I tell thee for thy comfort this, give me thy heart, adore me, serve me, cling in faith and love and reverence to me. So shalt thou come to me, I promise true, for thou art sweet to me. And let go those rites and writ duties, fly to me alone. Make me thy single refuge. I will free thy soul from all its sins. Be of good cheer. It basically here, again, the law and the spirit of the law, both must be understood. And the light shineth in the darkness. And I think the wise disciple understands that he is in darkness, and I don't yet see that light. And to be able to know that empowers us, impels us, gives us the motivation to actually seek that light. And ultimately, that's the act of grace, inviting grace into our lives, inviting divine love into our life. And our task as devotees is to be able to harmonize with that flow of grace, putting ourselves in its presence, just like the ignorant, putting themselves in the presence of the wise. And we can do that. This is the disciple putting themselves in the presence of the Guru through physical presence or through meditation, and ultimately through the love of the heart. Now, this is a big subject, and I'm going to leave it at that because we have a certain limitation of time. But it's been a joy, and it is a joy always to share these teachings with you. So let us now take it on to the Festival of Light, or no, the offertory.
Thank you, Jaya, for that beautifully inspiring talk. We're always so blessed and graced to have you with us. Please take what you'd like to give, place it in your right hand, and repeat after me. Divine Mother, we offer to thee the fruit of our labors.
We offer to thee the fruit of our labors.
Bless this offering, that it serve as a channel of thy light to truth-seeking souls everywhere. Om, peace, amen.